Howdy everybody, my name is Grant with Team Evo, and today we're going to be talking about a deck that I've been playing around with for the last couple months, the Fiendsmith Chimera. I think the deck is really interesting right now, and I think the Chimera cards and the Fiendsmith cards work exceptionally well together. So we're going to go over my deck list that I've been practicing around with, and we're going to show you some of the combo lines that I've been going for. This deck is far from solved, I think, at the moment. I think there's a lot of room for the deck to grow. So let's get into it. For the main deck, we're running the standard Chimera stuff. We've got 3 Sword Knight, 3 Coatl, 3 Gazelle, and 3 Nightmare Apprentice. I'm showing you these together because any combination of these two cards is full combo, because the first one searches for whatever illusion you're missing, and then if you're missing the Gazelle, you search for Coatl to grab it. I'll show you that combo line, how that works later on. My favorite combination of these two draw is the Gazelle plus the Cornfield Coatl. That's because the first thing I like to do in my turn is search for a fusion spell, because the hands that open a fusion spell are much more powerful than the hands that don't. So if your first search is for a fusion spell, you're able to do that under draw, which is really nice. And then, Coatl grabs Sword Knight, then you just keep going. Any two of these 4 cards will do the combo. If you draw like these two, you don't get the Coatl in graveyard, but everything else is insured. Next up, we are playing 3 Chimera Fusion, because the hands where you open a fusion card are much better than the hands you don't, and oftentimes I will go through all 3 Chimera Fusion in the course of a turn if I open one of them. 2 Baphomet, that's pretty standard ratio at this point. You could drop this down to 1, because it's not good to draw. You really want to summon it with Sword Knight, but I think just having a critical number of monsters to fuse with is important, so Baphomet will stay. I'm running 1 Diabell's the original Sin Keeper and 1 Master Tau. I could see you cutting the Diabell's from the main deck for a different Floodgate. I know a lot of people are playing the Dark Barrier statue at the moment, but I think Diabell's is just a much more generic Floodgate. There are very few decks that aren't at least somewhat impacted by Diabell's. The interesting thing about the Diabell's right now is that you don't always go into it. It's actually, you need to draw a critical mass of engine and not get hand trapped to go into it. But the logic there is if you don't get hand trapped, your opponent might be on board breakers. And if that is the case, then Diabell's is going to get a lot better. So it's kind of a self-correcting system. We're playing 3 copies of the Fiendsmith. You could play 2 if you wanted to, or if you don't want to buy all 3. But I'm playing 3 because it's good to start out with. We're playing 1 Tract and 1 Lurie, just the standard Fiendsmith engine. And then we are playing the Sinister Necrom and Adusted Gold package. We've got 1 Sinister Necrom, 2 Adusted Gold, and 2 Dark Fusion. The reason I'm playing the multiple Adusted Gold and multiple Dark Fusion is, like I said before, we really want to see more fusion spells in our opener. The Dark Fusion is really good to make the Adusted Gold not dead if you draw it, and if you're already playing more Dark Fusion, you could up the number of Adusted Gold as well. Then we've got Called by the Grave. It's Called by the Grave. This deck is fairly susceptible to hand traps. Sometimes 1 or 2 will stop the combo. It's not the most common in the world, but it happens. And then we are playing 12 non-engine, 3 Ash Blossom, 3 Imperm, 3 Veiler, and I'm choosing as my 4th hand trap to run the Bestials. This is really good in this deck for a couple reasons. The first one is that you have a lot of darks that you do sometimes want to see banished. You could banish like a Nightmare Apprentice early in the combo to be able to search it back with Baphomet in your opponent's next end phase. Additionally, they count as a body on the field for Guardian Chimera, so it's really nice for flexibility there. That's it for the main deck. For the extra deck, we've got 1 Requiem, 1 Sequence, standard for Fiendsmith. I'm playing 1 Link Spider. I don't have it on me at the moment, but this is a Link Spider. You'll see why I'm playing that in a little bit, because it has very specific applications with lines that play through Nibiru. Again, I don't think this deck is solved, but the Link Spider is feeling pretty good right now. Cross Sheep, because you need it for the opening combo if you open just the Fiendsmith, and it's also just pretty good. And SP Little Knight, because it's SP. We're running 1 Chimera the King, with 2 copies of Baphomet, and 1 Chimera the Illusion Beast. This is standard Chimera ratios. We're running 1 Fiendsmith the Lacrima and 1 Aerial Eater. This card is needed for the Fiendsmith 1-card combo, and if you get hand trapped really early on, it's helpful for getting like the Sinister Necrom in rotation. This card you could cut for a different Fiendsmith combo. but I really like it for the one card combo reasons. And then Lacrima's Lacrima. I'm not playing the Necro Quip. I don't think it comes up very much in this deck, but you could play it. Additionally, I'm not playing the Patchwork Engine, as I think you guys noticed earlier. This card is incredible with Patchwork version of this deck. We're also playing one Guardian Chimera and one Magnum the Reliever. One interesting thing about Magnum is it is a light fiend, so sometimes you do make this to bridge into your Fiendsmith part of the engine. This happens a lot if you get ashed on Sinister Necrom. We're running one Beatrice because it's Beatrice, and one Caesar because it's the most powerful thing you can do going first in the current moment, in my opinion. And for the side deck's fairly loose. I'm running 3 Phantasme. It's not really a huge region. It's just that when you're going second, you do want another consistency card because you're boarding out one Diabell's, one Call By, and one of the Nightmare Apprentice. I like this just to make up for the consistency. Chimera has a little bit of like a slight bricking problem where you just draw not enough stuff, or like too many fusion spells, or not enough fusion spells, or you know, the wrong number of monsters, etc. This will fix that problem for you, which I really like. 3 Droll for just combo decks, really. 3 Ghost Ogre. This is mostly for Ubel and for Voiceless. I'm running 3 Cosmic Cyclone, just because I think that this is not only an incredible card going first in combination with Diabelle, so you can just snipe any breaker, but also for the stun matchup. And then 3 Crossout, that's for going first, because this deck, as I said earlier, can be susceptible to hand traps if you hit it in the right way. Alright, that's the deck list. Some things I am not playing that I think are important to notice are these 3. Muckraker doesn't come up a whole lot because I am playing the Cross Sheep combo. If you're not playing Cross Sheep, you do need to play Muckraker, so that way when you're dumping either off Beatrice or Aerial Eater your Baphomet, you can summon it back with Muckraker. The reason I'm not doing that is because that line Fusion locks you and Fiend locks you through the Muckraker. And I'm not a huge fan of that because I still want to go into Chimera the King. It's an option, but it's not my preferred one. I'm not playing Moon because you have 2 really easy ways into the Fiendsmith engine as it is, through Magnum and through Sinister Necrom. So I feel like Moon doesn't really come up a whole lot unless in situations like you get hand trapped like 2 or 3 times. It's weird. I think you could play this instead of like the Link Spider for different situations, but this one's not bad. And then Appaloosa. So when I was first testing the combos for this deck for Nats, because I play this deck in Nats, I was going into Appaloosa to stop people from ashing my Sword Knight, because that is the biggest issue with this deck, is when people ash your Sword Knight. However, what I began to realize after Nats is that they are not using the ash on Sword Knight. They're using the ash much before Sword Knight hits the field. Usually on Sinister Necrom, to be completely honest. And if they're ashing the Sinister Necrom, that means that you do not need ash for the sword. You do not need to protect against ash on Sword Knight. That's why I've chosen to go for Caesar much more often, because the lines are a lot more flexible. I'm not playing these 3 cards, however, I think you could easily play them. And then now I'm going to set up and show you guys the combos. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the combos that I usually go for. This combo can be done with any 2 of these 4 monsters. My favorite ones to open are these, because I think they play around the most. But I'll show you guys what that looks like here. If you open up these 2, remember your first search I think should be for a fusion spell, so we'll go Normal Summon Gazelle to grab the Chimera Fusion. If they droll us, we just Chimera Fusion into Baphomet and keep going. But if they don't, you go Cornfield Coatl to add the Sword Knight, and then you activate your Chimera Fusion. One of the reasons you're going to be normal summoning Gazelle and not Sword Knight like you traditionally would in the past is because you're able to summon the Sword Knight through a plethora of other ways. Summon out Baphomet. We'll go Baphomet 1, Gazelle 2. Gazelle is going to add the Nightmare Apprentice, and Baphomet is going to dump the Sinister Necrom. One thing that's really interesting about this deck in particular is that Imperm and Valor cards do almost nothing against you. The most of the combo, you either have a Chimera Fusion in hand, or you have a Coatl in the graveyard with Chimera up. So you have a really good way to insulate against those 2 cards. We'll go Chimera Fusion effect, add that back to hand. It's worth noting now that in a normal hand, this is like a 2-card combo, you're going to have like 3 other cards in hand. I'll just show you what those are right now, because we will need to discard one of these cards for the Nightmare Apprentice. We'll assume that card does nothing. Discard this extraneous Ash Blossom for Nightmare Apprentice and Apprentice effect. We're going to search here Master Tau the Chanter. The reason we're going to search Master Tau the Chanter is because it plays a little bit better into some hand traps later on. We really want to have something to fuse into that will reborn the Sword Knight. In theory, what you could do is you could also search out the D-Bells to get that in rotation. If that were really valuable in the matchup, I'll show you where I would pivot to search that out. I think this is just a little bit safer into interaction. Here we would go Sinister Necrom effect to summon the Adusted Gold from our deck. And we can link out the Adusted Gold for Requiem. Requiem effect to summon out the Fiendsmith. And we'll link these two into sequence. Sequence effect, remember that at this point it is protected by the Coatl and Baphomet on field. So it is not susceptible to like an imperm at this point. Might seem weird. We're going to shuffle back the Fiendsmith and the Requiem. There's a very specific reason we're doing this, and that's because you need to add back the Adusted Gold off of the Lacrima, and if you add back the Engraver to do that combo, you have to discard another card, which I'm not a particularly good fan of. Once the new Fiendsmith comes out, you would leave this in graveyard and you'd shuffle back the other Fiendsmith. That also lets you summon back the Engraver to do other combos with. But for now, it'll just be these two that we're shuffling back. Summon out the Lacrima, and then Lacrima effect to add the Adusted Gold back to your hand. Remember, it does not need to be the Fiendsmith exactly, just a light fiend. We're going to overlay these two now. This is like the nib zone. We'll return to this board state in just a moment to show you what would happen if you get nibbed here. But this is like the point. Because you are making Caesar. We'll go Adusted Gold in hand. That's going to search out a Dark Fusion. Remember, we're playing multiple copies of this because we really want to draw it. Then we're going to go Dark Fusion to fuse away the Master Tau and the Sequence on field. That's going to make Magnum the reliever. Magnum is going to draw us a card towards the end of the combo. Master Tau's effect here is going to proc Reborning the Sword Knight. Important to note, I usually like to use the Sword Knight effect at the chain after it is summoned. Reason being, if they have like nib plus imperm, now we are at a point where it would be susceptible to nib plus imperm. So if they have that, I want to activate the Sword Knight before they get a chance to use that, using player priority, to get the Baphomet in rotation to recur the resources. So we'll go Sword Knight effect here. Grab Baphomet, we'll go Baphomet effect. And that'll search out another Chimera Fusion and a Gazelle. That's both Chimera Fusions searched out. And remember, if we had drawn one, we'd have gone through all three, which is why we're playing all three of them. Chimera Fusion here, that will fuse these two together to summon out Chimera the King. We'll go Baphomet 1, Chimera 2, summon back the Sword Knight. And at this point, here's the interaction we have. We have the Sword Knight on our opponent's turn to search for another Baphomet, to search out the last Chimera Fusion and another Gazelle. This also sets up a Guardian Chimera play on our opponent's turn as we're setting this Chimera Fusion, fuse away the Gazelle, the Baphomet, and some extraneous piece of interaction. Usually it's like these three, where it's Chimera, Baphomet, and Gazelle, and then once we detach from the Caesar, you can use the Chimera in graveyard to resummon the Baphomet. That counts as Chimera on the field, and then if that gets outed, you can go Baphomet, summon back the Chimera. It's a little bit of a loop that it forms. We've also got Magnum as a once per turn pop. Remember, we've got the Dark Fusion to graveyard, so that is always live. We've got the draw off the Magnum, which I did forget to do for this combo. You thin yourself out of a lot of cards for this combo in particular, which means that you're very likely to draw a hand trap off of the Magnum, which is why I particularly like playing hand traps in this deck. We've also got the Caesar, which is just an incredibly powerful piece of interaction. In a matchup where they are playing like maybe a Runic or a Branded, I would probably, instead of making Caesar, go for the Beatrice to dump the D-Bell so I can get that in rotation. And then on your opponent's turn, you can play like a Farfa to act as another piece of interaction. That's the very basic combo that I strive to go for each game. I'm going to show you what I do if I just have a Fiendsmith in my hand. So if I just have Engraver in my hand, I'll activate the Engraver, search out for the Tract effect, add, dump, Lurry. Lurry effect is summon back, and then we go link one for Requiem, then we go into Fiendsmith. This is the standard Fiendsmith line. put back the Lurie, summon out the other Fiendsmith, and then we go for the sequence. Sequence effect, we're going to shuffle back these two, and this is where the line diverges. Well, what you can do is you have two options. If you're playing the Muckraker, you can make Lacrima, make Beatrice, dump the Baphomet, and then Muckraker to reborn it. But what I am going to do here is I'm actually going to make Aerial Eater. Aerial Eater effect is going to dump the Sinister Necrom, which we have not used for this part of the combo, and it's really not going to come up for the rest of the game, and you don't really want to draw the Sinister Necrom in particular, so I'm just going to get it out of rotation. Necrom effect is going to summon the Dusted Gold, and then we're going to use the Tracked effect in Graveyard. Remember, this converts what would be 2 6s and a Link 2 into 3 6s, but one of those 6s can reborn itself, which is the important part. We'll go fusion these two into Lacrima, and Lacrima effect's going to reborn. I usually try to target and reborn the Dusted Gold, so that way if they have like a Bestial, the Fiendsmith can stay in the graveyard for next turn. Overlay these two into Beatrice, and then Beatrice effect will dump the Sword Knight. Link 2 into Cross Sheep. Remember that we're playing this instead of the Muckraker for this reason. And we're going to go, once it's sent to graveyard, Lacrima effect to put back the sequence to burn. And then we can banish the Lacrima plus the Engraver to summon back out the Aerial Eater. Summoning it to the link point of the Cross Sheep triggers the Cross Sheep, bringing back out the Sword Knight. You have two options here. If you think your opponent's going to nib you at this point, you can just Sword Knight on summon. But if you think they're not, you can go for a Link 2. The two things that I would recommend are either SP, or if you're playing the White Hat Hare, you could summon that here. That's a really strong piece of interaction, but I think it's a little bit better in Breaker meta, so I'm not choosing to play it right now. We'll go SP. There's not really anything you want to SP on summon, so we'll just stick with it. On summon, you will go Sword Knight, however. Bring out the Baphomet effect, grab Gazelle and Chimera Fusion. We have not normal, so we'll normal the Gazelle to search out a second copy of Chimera Fusion, and we will use Chimera Fusion to fuse all those together into Chimera the King. We'll go 1, 2, 3, summoning back the Sword Knight, ripping a card out of our opponent's hand in the end phase, and searching out a Coatl. Add back the Chimera Fusion, and we'll activate it. This will send these two to the graveyard to summon out the Baphomet. Baphomet effect is going to send a Fiend Beast Illusion from deck to grave. At this point, I will just pick the Diabels. If you have an additional fusion spell in your hand and an additional monster you want to burn, you could also go for a Magnum here, put back a Chimera Fusion, and then draw a card. That is personal preference, though. If we just have the one card, we're not going to be doing that. In your opponent's draw phase, you can go Sword Knight effect, and you can go Chimera effect in the graveyard to summon out the Diabels. Sometimes I'll go for this line if the Diabels is particularly powerful and I do draw the Engraver in my turn. Alright, so I've gotten us back to the point that I mentioned earlier where I'm going to show you the nib line. Sequence effect here is going to put back the Engraver and the Requiem, just like I said earlier. Summon out Lacrima effect to add the Dusted Gold back to our hand. Here we are threatening both Apo and Caesar, so they probably will nib us here. If they do, these three are sent to the graveyard. We are given a token, probably in that zone, knowing this game. Lacrima effect I'll activate, putting the sequence back into the extra. And then what I would do if the new Fiendsmith stuff were out is I would just summon back the Fiendsmith that we kept in the graveyard, put back the Lacrima, and then make a Link 2 play, usually for a Cross Sheep. However, given the circumstances of us not having that monster, since we don't have the new Fiendsmith card yet, what I would do is I would link out the token for the Link Spider. Remember, that's Link Spider. Activate the Dusted Gold to search out the Dark Fusion, and then I would go Dark Fusion here, fusing the Tau plus the Link Spider to make Magnum. Tau effect activates, reborning the Sword Knight. And then you can go Sword Knight effect on summon. And this line is going to look very similar to what we did before because it's essentially the exact same thing. If you did not normal the Gazelle here, you can do that at this point, but I'm guessing you probably did. Make Chimera, and then reborn that Sword Knight, rip a card out of your opponent's hand in the end phase. As you can see, we're at the exact same position as before, except we just don't have Caesar. Alright, that's the combos I usually go for. Remember, this deck is kind of still an open question. I'm not sure what the best lines to go for, but these are the ones that have had the most success for me in the past couple of months. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember to like, subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you guys next time. See ya!